My name is Betty Robinson. I've lived at Westminster Towers for 3.5 years now. I wanted to come sooner, but my husband liked it in our home. And so we came when he was ill and we needed help. I've lived in Orlando all my life because I'm not only a native, but my mother was a native Orlandoan, and I'm pretty provincial. Well, anyway, I've been a lot of places, but I'm still kind of a country town girl. I love my life here at Westminster Towers. My mother was here at the end of her life for about 15 years, and Jim was active in building it, and it had a special place in my heart because the church I belonged to actually built it. It was not part of the Presbyterian Homes of Florida then. It was an independent thing, and we were close to the minister and to Grover Towers, who were the two movers and shakers that thought of it. So I have always considered that I'd like to be here too, and I'm very happy that I am. I think we're getting the best care and attention that we could, especially in this time. I've had a very interesting life, but not on my own. It was really because of my husband. He was kind of a local mover and shaker too for a while, and so I got to meet a lot of interesting people in my life. I met one president and some presidential candidates, senators, governors, mayors. I've known a lot of them, and it's been interesting because they were interesting people. One of the ones I liked the most was Leroy Collins when he ran for the Senate. He was a marvelous person, and frankly, it was too bad he didn't get elected, but he didn't. And my husband was in the service in World War II. We're part of the greatest generation. And he learned that it was nice to travel. He traveled courtesy of Uncle Sam to France and Germany. And when we could, we began to travel. And I had been all around South America before I'd ever been to New York City. I tell you, I'm a country girl. And after that, we took many trips, sometimes with friends, just the two couples, sometimes with a group, sometimes by ourselves with a guide, and they were all great. We actually touched all the continents. And people say, what do you remember the most? Well, how can you not remember Antarctica with all the ice and all those darn penguins? Because there are millions of them there. And I have enjoyed every trip we took, I think. We went several times to France because Jim discovered he had a Huguenot ancestor and he became a Francophile. And we went there more than anywhere else, I guess. But we went with lawyers' groups because there was an international law group, and those were mostly to Hispanic areas. Some of our travel was with international law groups of the Florida Bar. We went to Central America when it was safer, and we went to Argentina, and then we went to Spain with them 1 or 2 times. And we also went to meetings where my husband was on the board, and we went many times, several times, to San Francisco. He went once when I couldn't go because I was 8 months pregnant, and I never forgave him, really. Well, I did, but it was a good story. And so we did like to do that. When we were older, we did a few trips around the United States too. And in the meantime, I did get to New York City. We were very fond of Davis Gaines. Well, we were fond of his parents, and so we went with a partner of Jim's to Los Angeles to see him in the Phantom. And it was very nice because it was his aunt that we went with, and he was very good to us. He even took us to lunch at the Ivy, and I think I heard after that that's the place. It was that, at that time anyway, the place. So I've just known a lot of interesting people, but all really through my husband, except for one thing that I did, that he kind of got me into it because he heard about a foreign student that was here. And he got interested in the organization, and so did I. It was American Field Service, now just called AFS because it's changed some since then. But in 1972, we hosted a young lady from Thailand. And it's been a wonderful experience, and we are close to this day. She has come almost every year to visit, and we consider her daughter to be our granddaughter. So after she was here, they needed a chairman for this area, and I was kind of bad about volunteering, so I did it. But it was a very interesting and educational part of my life. We hosted about 8 or 9 students in this area. So I worked with them and their families, and then I went to schools to try to get there had to be a club in the school for the student to come, and the club at that time had to raise $300 and something to bring the student here. Well, I went to various high schools and tried to establish a club and bring more students. And that was interesting too. I loved that part of my life. I don't know that I'd go back and do it again. It was pretty hard work. And we took care of the students when they came. We didn't just bring them here and put them somewhere and leave them. If they weren't happy, we moved them. And if we couldn't get them happy, we sent them back. But I don't remember sending any back. We had a couple of families that took more than one in because when they were unhappy, they took them in and mothered them. We had some great mothers, and mentored them in their own family.
How long would they generally stay with
They
you?
stayed for 1 year, and the ones that went from here sometimes went a year and sometimes just went for the summer. And we had a girl that was very self-sufficient, very able to take care of herself, and she went to Turkey to a Muslim family, and she came back. She was an independent girl, not the bad way, but just able to take care of herself. And she said she couldn't go anywhere without a male member of the family going with her. And she had that they fixed the meal, the breakfast for the men, and the men ate. Then the women ate, and then they cleaned the rugs. Then they had lunch, and the men ate, and the women ate, and they cleaned the rugs. Then they had dinner the same way, and she really she took it very well because she was so mature. And some of us might not have been able to take that.
So you and your husband personally hosted 8 or 9 exchange students?
No, they came and they were in separate families, in separate communities. There was one in Winter Park, and one at Edgewater, and one at Boone, and one at Oak Ridge. Oak Ridge was a better school than it is known to be now, and I've forgotten where they were. There was one in Winter Haven, I believe, and I don't remember. That's been a while. They were all interesting. I remember the boy from Chile. They would go and speak at different schools, all of them, on an assembly program. And he said, "I'm from Chile. It's that country that's very long and very skinny." And he said, "When we have a party in Chile, we really party. We don't have chips and Cokes." And it was very informative. We had a pair that fell so madly in love, I thought they would never be parted. And she was from Latin America, and he was from England. But when he went home, I understand he still had his English girlfriend. It was so hard for them to be parted.
Now, you've done so many interesting things with the travel with your husband and raising your family and working with the exchange students. If you could go back to any stage in your life, what stage would you want to revisit?
That's a very difficult question because most of my life has been very happy and good. I've had periods when it wasn't happy and good, but probably when my children were little. And I remember taking them to swimming lessons in Winter Park, and then of course all the time that we traveled when we had an empty nest was good too. It's hard to say.
So you've lived here at the Towers for 3 years.
Right.
For the last couple months, we've been, under quarantine.
I call it lockdown. in quotation marks.
What sorts of things have you been doing to stay busy during the quarantine?
Well, I don't have any trouble entertaining myself. I like to read, and I get a good bit of interesting information on my computer. I spend a lot of time with it, and I haven't done my income tax yet, so I still have plenty to do because last year I sold my home, and I'm a procrastinator when that comes to it, and my daughter will probably she'll have to probably sneak in here and push me along for me to get it done in time.
Yes, the tax date's coming up, so if you haven't done your taxes, make sure you note that on your calendar.
July 15th, and most everybody has but me. I'm the worst in the world, but I have the most wonderful accountant, and he is so patient with me.
Now, I see these two stuffed bears here in your chair. Can you talk a little bit about these?
Yes, these are very dear little bears, because after my husband was Jim, and I'll call him Jim because that was his name. After Jim died, hospice came to me and said, "Do you have any of his clothes?" And I said, "Well, I gave them away." "Well, do you have anything left?" And I said, "Well, I've got his bathrobes." And he had two, one burgundy, one gray. And so he said, "Well, give me those." And quite a while later, he brought them back. And these are my two teddy bears. I really meant to give them to my two great-grandsons when they visited, but they couldn't take them home. They were too bulky to fit in their suitcases. Hospice was very good to me and was very good to Jim. He was ill, had COPD, and was having very difficult times with breathing. But he got out of bed one morning to come to get his breakfast and stumbled over the tube to his oxygen machine and fell. And he broke so many bones and was so badly injured that they couldn't do anything to save him. So hospice came in and kept him from suffering for the last 2 or 3 days of his life. And I didn't know which one to take, but I'd seen the Vitas truck here, so I said that one, but I still don't know. But I thought this was a very nice gesture of Vitas.
That is so thoughtful.
Yes,
such
it
a nice
was.
Memory to keep for your grandchildren.
And they're growing up. They may not want them anymore, but they don't fit in a suitcase well.
Sure. Well,
I have another foreign connection because we were married for 11 years without children, and this was not happy for us. So we applied and adopted a girl through the Children's Home Society of Florida, and they said we could have another one 2 years later. So we adopted a boy, almost exactly 2 years later. And then we had what I call my do-it-yourself project. We had one the usual way. And he was a very independent fellow, maybe like his parents, I don't know. And he went to Germany to study for a year, and while he was traveling around after that year, he met a girl, a Belgian girl. And at the end of after he finished at Eckerd College, he left and went to Belgium, and I thought he'd be back, but he never came back except to visit. And so we have as many Belgian relatives as I do living in Orlando. My other two children stayed here to take care of Mother, but he's off wild blue yonder.
Wow.
And I have now 7 relatives there, I think. I have my son and his wife, my grandson and his wife, their 3 children, and my granddaughter. And they usually come to visit me, but this has been a very tough year. They couldn't come. And I hope they'll be able to come next year. I hope I'm still here.
Are the relatives in Belgium, are they all bilingual? Do they all speak English fluently?
No, the grandchildren do, but the great-grands do not.
Okay.
And they're trying to learn, but as it is when you have another language, you don't speak it well. Mm-hmm. You may understand it, but my son, just for his first child, he didn't ever say anything except in English. And his wife understood that, which is why it could happen, I'm sure. And she spoke to him in French. And so when he was 3 years old, he would speak to you in whatever language you spoke to him. And he's very good at language. And then my granddaughter came along 3 years later, and they built a home, and grandmother moved in with them, and she didn't speak English. So her English is not quite as good, but she can talk to me. I talk to him on the phone often.
Nice. Well, are there any final words or final thoughts you'd like to leave with your neighbors?
We should be very grateful to the First Presbyterian Church of Orlando for building this building, and for those who have kept it and got it and took it into the Westminster communities. We ought to be very thankful to them. This is an elegant place to live. Sometimes there are things we don't like, but when we think about it all, I figure I live like a queen, except now I have to wash my own dishes, and I always had to make my bed. But I say it's kind of like being on a cruise ship. Everything's done for you. You're entertained, you're fed, you're housed, and I love it.
Good. Well, thank you so much, Ms. Robinson, for your time today.
It was a
We
pleasure.
appreciate you. Thank you so much, and thank you for watching.